What's up, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of The Lawyer You Know. And we finally finished Jen McCabe's testimony today. More cross, very different than the last time you saw Alan Jackson crossing Jen McCabe just a couple days ago. Her redirect, which was incredibly interesting and potentially opened some doors. And then recross before we hear from the toxicologist. So much to get to today. So many interesting things happened and so much still yet unproven. So we are also going to introduce our very first time brand new intro. Let me know what you think in the chat. Hit the like button. Let's go. All right. Also stick around till the end because we have a brand new outro that's much longer and you get to really see Kelsey's editing chops if you want to stick around and watch that. But I am also going to answer your questions, right? I don't think I said that, but I love answering your questions as we go throughout a day of trial so I can see what are you thinking? What are you picking up on? What questions do you have? What do you think has been proven? What do you think has not been proven? I also was able to record a podcast today at lunchtime with my dad to get his take on this week, which was pretty interesting. Some different takes than I had. And he saw some things differently than I did. And that's coming from somebody who didn't really watch the entire first trial. So somebody said the lawyer you bro intro. I like it. I like it. The lawyer you bro. But let's jump in here pretty early on into the cross today. Alan Jackson, in my opinion, it was a bit of a struggle. He was going up against Hank Brennan, Jennifer McCabe, and Judge Cannone yesterday, trying to impeach Jen McCabe, being forced to refresh your recollection inappropriately, in my opinion. You know, Mark Betterow and I talked about some different ways to do it. And by golly, Alan Jackson, good lawyers adapt. And he adapted, and we got to see it almost right off the bat today. He went right back to some of those inconsistencies, and to me, handled it masterfully, legally speaking, right? You may think maybe it did have a big effect, maybe it didn't, but I thought that he really did a great job lawyering his way through this cross-examination and adapting from some of the difficulties that happened yesterday. So let's take a listen here.
Actually, 1 through 3. It's 782 going to 783. Mayor, Coach Ron?
Yes.
Stated, quote, so I think my husband and I were talking. I'm going to back up just a little bit up to line 20. You stated, quote, so I think my husband and I were talking just like about what they were doing. And then I sat back down. And then at one point, I think I said, hello. And then I said at 12:42, where are you? And then flip. I don't know if that's my last text or if I did one more. Yeah, 12:45, hello, because they were still there. And then question. So the dark SUV was still outside the house at 12:45. Answer, at 12:45. Do you remember that question and answer colloquy back in June of 2023?
I've been asked a number of questions, specifically those words, no. I do remember testifying. I believe I said, I think in there. I think that, and to be honest,
One of our new things is going to be, I said, I think. So I think is not for sure saying it. So if I've changed it, it just means I think something different. But Jackson was going to stick to the new plan.
I'm not sure of exactly the times. I didn't pay close attention to when I was texting and when I was sitting. I was going back and forth to the door.
But in June of 2023, at a hearing under oath, you did say that it was at 12:45 that you last saw the vehicle.
I believe I said, I think. I believe the word I think is in there.
You believe it, not sure.
Okay, I'll look at it. Sure. Yes. Thank you.
He went in with, you said back then you thought you saw that car at 12:45 or whatever. You saw the car at 12:45, which is exactly the way I thought he should say it. And now she's going to look and say, well, did I just say I think? And now here's her answer.
Does that refresh your recollection, Mr. McCabe, what you said in June of 2023 about seeing the SUV at the location at 12:45?
I see what I read. Sorry. I saw what I just read. I don't remember my exact words of every testimony, but I did just read that. Yes.
And in fact, what you said.
I saw what I just read. It's like, what? But again, I don't know that jurors pick up on that. I pick up on it. I'm listening. I'm a lawyer. I've impeached witnesses before. I am able to slow it down, back it up. I don't know if the jurors are picking up on that quite like I am, but that just sounds horrible to me.
Back in June of 2023, quote, I don't know if it's my last text or if I did one more. Yeah, 12:45, hello, because they were still there. period, correct?
That's a part of what I said.
And then the question was, so the dark SUV was still outside the house at 12:45. Answer, at 12:45.
And then I said, I think, my husband and I. So there's more to that conversation.
Okay, what I read you is what transcript indicates. You said on June 8th, 2023, correct?
Can you answer that? Is that correct?
That I saw it at that time.
Ask the question again.
Sure. That what you testified to in June of 2023 was you saw the SUV for the last time at 12:45. That's what you said, at least back then.
That's part of what I said.
So he gets her to at least say that that is part of what she said. Angela said the past juror on the defense team is somewhere watching streams and relaying info to AJ, in my opinion, to give an idea of what people like us in the chat are thinking. It's possible. It's possible, right? The chat is usually pretty spot on, at least majority. I know there's people on both sides of this case, so I don't think it's a bad idea to follow it at all. Okay, so she then started using some different ways of answering questions where she would say things like, I know the answer to the question, but I don't know what I said the other day. She talks about making a call at 5:07 a.m. to her sister, Nicole Albert, who lived at 34 Fairview that morning. She doesn't remember it, of course. She says it wasn't answered. She said they didn't have a call. I mean, the fact that she just like acts like it doesn't exist to me, but it's on the records is kind of wild. And when you think about what 5:07 a.m. means, that's before Karen Reed and she are driving to Nicole Albert's house. That's before she does not go into Nicole Albert's house until an officer tells her to go in there. So why are you calling her before you get to her house, but you're not thinking I need to go in there and get her right away? That is such a strange thing. Does it mean there's a conspiracy? No. Does it mean that they did this to John O'Keefe? No. But does it mean there's some very suspicious things going on that the defense is highlighting in front of the jury? To me, yes. To me, that is so strange. Hard to wrap my mind around. Lank had to tell her to go inside. Okay, now we get into what some people are calling the best part of the day. Maureen, I'll put your comment up here as we listen to this.
Wait, you're aware that your phone records actually show that at 5:07 you called the 34 Fairview Nicole Albert's phone, correct?
Correct.
Shows also
Jackson walks away from the mic a couple times. I can repeat the questions, but you'll get the context from her answers.
that call lasted 38 seconds, correct?
I'm not sure what it shows.
You actually spoke to your sister, Nicole, that morning?
I did not speak to my sister, no.
So that
All lasted 38 seconds, but they didn't speak.
38-second call went to voicemail,
I'm not sure. All I can tell you is I never spoke to my sister, Nicole, that morning prior to waking her up.
but you do acknowledge that you made a phone call at 5:07 to to Nicole Albert, your sister, over at 34 Fairview in those early morning hours. Right?
Yes, I learned after. When I'm first being questioned, it's days after. It was a chaotic morning. I remembered the waterfall, Julie, then Tom Beatty. Calling to my sister wasn't as important ingrained in my mind at that point. No.
And then you testified at a grand jury, not hours or days later. You testified at a grand jury months later, correct?
Correct.
And at that grand jury, you also left out the fact that you contacted your sister, correct?
There's nothing nefarious. I remembered who I called. I didn't go back and look at phone records
I didn't say it was nefarious. Why would you use the word nefarious?
because
She's like, what are you talking about this phone call? There's nothing nefarious going on there. He's like, I didn't say it was nefarious. Why did you say it was nefarious? As if Jackson hasn't been implying everything that she's doing is nefarious and suspect. He's like, whoa, why would you say I said that? It's like, come on, man. We all get what you're doing. But he's saying, you know it's nefarious. You know it sounds bad, and you've got to explain to this jury why it's not bad. That's what he's doing. And she is so prepared. She knows where he's going. She knows what he's doing, that she thinks by calling it out and saying that's not what's happening here, she thinks that's helping her. You tell me, is it helping her or is it hurting her? I don't know. It's up to the jury. Are they like, yeah, why would he think that's nefarious? Of course it's not. And she just said it wasn't. Or are they looking at her saying, why did you say that there was something wrong with that? We, the jury, wasn't thinking it was nefarious until you said something, Miss McCabe. That's possible too, because again, what does the jury know? They don't know what we know, hopefully.
there's nothing about me calling my sister that is nefarious, and I feel like you're insinuating it might be, and it's not.
Did you use that word because it sounds nefarious?
No, I just used the word because I think that's how you're trying to portray something that is nothing.
He said, did you use that word because it sounds nefarious? To you, Miss McCabe? Does it sound nefarious to you?
that word because it sounds nefarious?
No, I just use the word because I think that's how you're trying to portray something that is nothing.
Or did you use that word because you think that's how it's coming across? That's nefarious.
No.
Without contacting 34 Fair.
No, not at all.
He's like, you sure it's not because you think all that sounds fair? She's like, no, not at all. Not at all. It's like, okay, if you say so. Then we get to more inconsistencies. Was the taillight cracked or was it cracked with pieces missing? What did she say to Proctor versus what is she saying now? Is Proctor yet again wrong in his report? If I was Brennan at this point, I would just be like, yeah, Proctor sucks. He's horrible. We all know it. His reports are all wrong. But it doesn't change the science, right? It doesn't change the evidence. The evidence is what it is, et cetera, et cetera. Kathleen said, are you more like AJ, Yannetti, or Alessi as a lawyer? I would say least like Alessi, even though I do handle a lot of the experts, especially the medical experts. I would say a combo of Jackson and Yannetti, probably more like Jackson. I would say other people would probably say more like Jackson. I try to be a mix of the two. Thank you, Rebecca, for gifting 20 memberships. Let's get to another strategy that Jackson employed today that he didn't employ yesterday, or whatever day the first day cross was, that I thought was extremely effective today.
Would it refresh your recollection? So look at a copy of this notes. If it wouldn't, just tell us.
No, it wouldn't.
He's like, would it refresh your recollection if I showed you Proctor's notes? She's like, no, it wouldn't. Anytime somebody tells me something won't refresh their recollection that clearly would, that's a bad sign.
As you sit here today, are you telling this jury that you deny saying to Trooper Proctor, you saw a crack in it? Are you denying that statement?
I'm not denying it.
So you could have told him that.
He asked me multiple times different questions. I spoke to him at my house, and then he had called me. So maybe one time I said it had a crack in it, and another time I said it was broken and missing pieces.
So it's very possible that that's how you described it on the 29th, Ms. McCabe. It had a crack in it, right?
And missing pieces.
I'm not asking you to finish my sentence. I'm asking you, is it possible that's what you told him that day? It had a crack in it. Yes or no?
Yes, that was one way. Mhm.
He got her to admit that's one way that she described it. And by the way, I did not mean anything negative about Alessi like that. We've talked before about how great he is and how great of a tool he is on this team in different aspects. I'm just saying my style, as you can tell, okay, that shouldn't be a surprise with how quickly I speak, that me and Alessi have a little bit of a different style. He's methodical and goes a lot slower through it, which can be very effective. And I need to tell myself to do that a lot of times at trial. But just naturally speaking, I would say that's not quite the style I usually have. We're going to listen to a little bit more here of this.
In the days following January 29th, in the events of January 29th, 2022, were you and your family coordinating your versions of the events that occurred on that morning?
No.
Were you and your family coordinating some sort of damage control in terms of the language that your family would use to the public, to the press, to law enforcement?
No.
Did you and your family use a group chat? You and part of your family use a group chat to text each other to coordinate your communications with either the press or the public or law enforcement or family or friends?
I have multiple group chats with family and friends.
You had a very specific group chat that included yourself, Nicole, your sister, Brian Albert, and Matt McCabe, correct?
Yes, I did.
So he does a really good lead up, a really good laying of the foundation to talk about this group chat. And then he reads a bunch of them. We're going to talk about some of them. We know what a lot of them are. A lot of them are very suspect. Some of them are damning. Some of them people are going to say, absolutely, they did something wrong, et cetera, et cetera. But we now know what Hank Brennan does on redirect, which is go and read through a bunch of self-serving hearsay, if you ask me, from some of the group chats that Jen McCabe is in. But what's very interesting is Jackson points out that's not in this group chat. That's not with this group of individuals. And he's starting to now separate what the group of individuals, who they are, that he's going to say something shady is going on there. When compared, it's not everybody. It's a certain specific group of individuals. They go through a bunch of their texts. They discuss Channel 4 being at D&E, talk to them, go talk to the cops, find out what's going on, get information. Matt McCabe says to Chris and Jen, I believe, tell them the guy never came in the house, ask questions. They've got some OMGs. They've got some, if she pleads out, it will end. If she fights it, it will be an episode. While Carrie Roberts is being interviewed, texts like, you listening? This girl could write a book. I love it. She's telling them everything. So if anybody was denying, including Carrie Roberts, that people could hear her interview or that they were being separated or were they being recorded and sectioned off so they couldn't hear what each other's saying, clearly not proven by the text messages. Now, there's a negative and a suspect way to read those text messages, and it looks not great for these people. But on the other side, and this is what I want you to think. And people that don't like explaining both sides, not the place for you, not the show for you. You have to understand, because we talk about this at our trial all the time. It's like, it's so obvious that this is going our way. It's like, yeah, but if they hate our client or they don't believe us or they hate us or whatever, they're going to dismiss that. And if they're with the Commonwealth at this point and they think Karen Reed has confessed and they think Karen Reed's bad because of these clips and they don't like Karen Reed, how are they looking at this evidence? And I think they're looking at this evidence in a way that these are normal text messages. These are friends that have been traumatized. They're just talking about the case. They're just feeling bad. They're just working through it together because this is a traumatic experience they're all a part of now. I think there is a way that she's telling them everything. I love it. If they wanted her to hide something, why would they love it that she's telling them everything? You've got to understand, or else you'll be shocked in the legal world far too often. You've got to understand not everybody sees it the same way you do, the same way I do, the same way the person next to you may see it. There's a lot of family members that watch the chat or watch this channel, which is awesome. Husbands and wives, people celebrating, birthdays and things like that. Chris Kinney said to wish Alex McIsaac, his cousin, a happy birthday. People say stuff like that and it's fun and happy birthday. But you have to understand, two family members sitting right next to each other, you might not see these text messages the same way. And that's important. That's important. And somebody said when they read the, if she pleads, it's all over text message, that's the end. It's like, or they want this traumatic experience over with. They don't want to have to come testify 20 times. I don't know. She said no, but she didn't think anybody could hear a conversation. I mean, let's be honest. How is Carrie supposed to know for a fact if somebody can hear her conversation unless they're standing right there? I agree with you. They absolutely could hear her conversation. Horrible police work, horrible investigative work, violating their own policies, not the way that they should. But will every juror see it that way? That's my question. Okay, where are we going from here? Oh, so this was interesting. When they talk about these private text messages and Jackson's trying to say, oh, this is collusion, you guys are colluding, and then Judge Cannoni steps in again.
The group was chatting back and forth or texting back and forth. Those were intended to be private texts between and among just the people on the text string, correct?
I just was texting my family. I wasn't thinking anymore of who was going to see it.
You certainly did not expect when you were writing those texts that the defense, as Karen Reed's representatives, would ever get a hold of those texts. That was not in your mind, correct?
Would never have been in my mind, no.
That is a textbook example, what we've just seen, of witnesses colluding with one another about a subject matter that's under investigation, correct?
All right, jurors.
So first off, that's not an appropriate question. This is a textbook example. How would she know a textbook example? Save your answers. I know what you guys are going to say, why she would know that. But that's not an appropriate question. But Brendan at least asked for the instruction this time before Cannoni jumped in. And I wanted to point that out because she's been doing this on her own without the prosecutor even asking for it, which is inappropriate. This time Brendan asked, Judge Cannoni felt it was appropriate. So yet again, she's going to tell the jury to disregard Jackson's question. Mary Claire, I thought that was pretty funny too. Like, why do you keep apologizing? Did somebody tell you to apologize? How many times did you apologize yesterday? What's going on here?
Disregard that comment completely. Disregard that question.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
And they approach because Jackson wants to fight it. And then he comes back, asks the question again, kind of differently. You agree you're colluding. She says no, of course, but he's definitely allowed to ask it. He just had to change kind of the way that he asked it. They also talk about Lank's house. Were you dropping off Lexi? Were you picking up Lexi? Again, not the most important thing to impeach, but he's trying to show the inconsistencies. Were you dropping somebody off? Were you picking somebody up? Why can you not remember? You should be able to remember this. And of course, if there's an inconsistency, she's apologizing. She just can't remember. This is her memory now. He tried to make it seem like it's impossible that in the freezing cold weather, they would sit in the car for 45 minutes with the heat on while they're talking. I've got to admit, I've done that before. It's not your plan, But sometimes when it happens, it happens. She went inside to go to the bathroom, came back out, and he wants to be like, yeah, right. You went inside and you talked about the case, is what he was trying to get at in his cross. Then they get to her timeline and they compare it to the data from her phone. And of course, she just keeps saying, I don't remember. Let's listen to a little bit of that clip.
The O'Keefe residence.
According to this, yes.
Are you asking her regarding?
I'm asking her memory, not according to the document.
My
Your
memory.
Your
I don't
memory.
remember exact times.
Thank you.
Stephanie, I would say I agree with this. I don't think he sounds tired. I just think the demeanor of everybody is more reserved, more professional this trial. And I actually think it bodes well for everybody. I think everybody's doing better when they're calmer. By the way, not passive, not easy, not soft. Jackson's being none of those, but not quite as loud and aggressive as often, because there definitely were moments of it during this cross.
Isn't it true, Ms. McCabe, that at 5:12 p.m. you left One Meadows, which is the O'Keefe residence, 5:12 in the evening?
That I don't remember the times that I left.
Isn't it true that at 5:21 you arrived back at your address on Country Lane?
I do not remember that.
Isn't it true that at 5:28, 7 minutes later, you actually left your address on Country Lane?
Again, I don't remember going by my house.
Isn't it true that at 5:36 you arrived at 34 Fairview and stayed for at least 4 minutes?
I know we drove by.
Isn't it true that at 5:40
Drove by or stayed there for 4 minutes? This data timeline that he's reading to her that he is allowed to read into evidence, I think it's in evidence already, or Brennan stipulated to it. This does not look good for her because she's like, I don't remember exact times, but all the things she didn't remember, maybe I did this, maybe I did that. No, we just drove by. No, we just stopped by. No, we went straight to Lank's house because we were dropping somebody off, not picking somebody up. This timeline does create, that's just not right. What she's saying is just not correct. Why? I don't know.
They're just thereafter, you left 34 Fairview.
I know we left and went to Mike Lank's.
And isn't it true at 5:43 you arrived on that Oakdale Road address at Sergeant Lank's house?
I'm not sure of the exact time, but yes, we did go to Sergeant Lank's house.
And isn't it true that at 6:28, almost 45 minutes later, actually a little better than 45 minutes later, you left that address at Michael Lank's house and drove back to your house directly?
After leaving Mike Lank's, I went home, correct?
And you arrived at your house at 6:34, correct?
According to the paper.
What about according to your memory?
I don't remember exact times.
I think that was
Mr.
pretty
Jackson, is this a good place to take a break?
is.
Do you
I'm
have a
about to
while?
I think that was pretty effective personally. I don't know what everybody else is going to say about that or what they garnered from that. But if the problem is, if you're Jen McCabe, just say yes. Oh yeah, I must have forgot we stopped by 34 Fairview. Okay, yeah, we went here because it doesn't prove anything. If you just say yes, it doesn't prove anything. But when you've been incorrect and now you're being impeached, what it proves is you're losing credibility. That's what it proves. You turn it into evidence when it might not have been otherwise. And that's what you have to be really careful about. So now they're going to take a break. I'm going to answer some questions. Do you think having law enforcement testify last is an intentional move by the Commonwealth in order to make it more difficult to impeach Kerry, JM, et cetera, since law enforcement reports are not in evidence yet? If so, do you think it's been effective? I do think it's been effective. Betterow had a good point. Maybe they're going to call the accident reconstructionists, lock that in, get the jury to believe whatever they're going to say about the science and the data so that the horrible investigation maybe isn't as shocking because they're like, well, it doesn't matter because the light lines up with the injuries, lines up with where he was standing, whatever. I don't know. We'll see. Christy Allison completed my MBA today. Congratulations. Thank you for all of the streams that got me through study breaks over the last 18 months. That's awesome. AJ, Peter, does impeach actually mean their testimony can't be considered? No. Or what does it actually mean to impeach a witness? It means to show an inconsistent statement and hit the credibility of the witness so that later in closing, one of the jury instructions is you, the jury, judge the credibility of witnesses. If you don't think they're credible, you don't have to believe what they say. If you find one witness more credible than the other, you can believe one and not the other. Nicolette, how do you impeach a witness? What's the process? Can the judge object or not allow / agree with this? Not a lawyer, haha. The judge doesn't, I mean, theoretically, the judge cannot allow anything, but they should allow proper impeachment, which is you get an inconsistent statement, you confirm they've given a prior statement under oath. I was here, they were there, court reporter there. You were asked this question, you gave this answer. Now today you're giving us an inconsistent answer. That's how you impeach a witness. You get an inconsistent answer. You confirm that they know they were deposed. They remember giving this statement under oath. And those are two inconsistent statements that you can follow up is, Which one's true? Are you telling the truth today? Were you telling the truth there? You show they've given two inconsistent statements. The jury can decide which one to believe or to believe neither. Turtle, thanks again for educating us on the law. Do you think it's a bad look for Jen McCabe to stop an interview by another agency to seek counsel? So she said seek counsel today. Yesterday, or whatever the last day was that he was deposing her, she didn't say to seek counsel. She just said she cut it off. That to me doesn't look good when it's compared with how she treated all other law enforcement agencies in this case. All right, let's get back to the testimony here. And right after the break, more Cannoni stuff.
Right back to the phone.
Okay. So you asked her if this would refresh her recollection. You need to ask her if this refreshes her recollection.
Sure. Do you remember, as you sit here, a phone call at 10:54 a.m.?
I remember getting a call. I don't remember the exact time.
Would it refresh your recollection to look at the document that you're holding as to the time of that phone call, time and date?
I see what the document says, but I just, in my head, if you ask me what time did he call you, I don't remember.
Do you have any quarrel with the accuracy of that document?
No, it looks pretty accurate.
Okay.
It looks right. It looks possible, yeah.
All right. Did you receive, as you sit here, do you recall, does that refresh your recollection that you received a phone call from Michael Proctor about 10:54 in the morning?
Does that refresh your memory now?
I know I did receive a phone call from him, yes.
At that time?
I don't know the exact time.
All right. So the answer is
It's not that it has to refresh your recollection now. It's you don't know the exact time. You know about when, and you look at a piece of paper that tells you the exact time. That should refresh your recollection. To say that it doesn't is to misunderstand the rule. And Cannoni is giving her this out over and over again. And this one was actually pretty funny because Brennan ends up agreeing that the document is legit and he can read all these text messages or phone calls between her and Proctor when they were, and it just looks bad. It looks even worse when you quibble about this stuff that I was going to say your own lawyer, but Brennan is not technically Jen McCabe's lawyer. Even he agrees it's legitimate, and there are a lot of calls between Proctor and McCabe. They also met on January 29th. Jackson gets into the fact that she told Tully she had never met Proctor. And she told Tully that in 2023, which wasn't true, but of course she denied it. She denied saying it, doesn't remember saying it. Another officer must have screwed up another report. And then the judge makes some more instructions.
2023.
No.
Would it refresh your recollection if you saw a copy of Lieutenant Tully's report?
I don't need to see the report because I know I told him that I met him on January 29th when he came to my house.
So again, Tully wrote, you never met the Proctor until September 2023.
I don't need to see the report.
That means error. Correct. You have to ask her instruction.
so. Again, that is sustained. Ladies and gentlemen, I instructed you on previous questions regarding the same type of thing, whether another witness is lying or not. Disregard the question and move on, Mr. Jackson.
If you had told Trooper Proctor, Trooper
Brennan did ask for that instruction. Just wanted to point that out.
Tully, Lieutenant Tully, that you had never met Trooper Proctor before September of 2023, would that have been a truthful or an untruthful statement?
Okay, come to sidebar, please.
And then we get a sidebar. Reeves, he said, you reminded me of Tom Cruise and Few Good Men. I believe when I ranked like my top 10 favorite law movies or legal movies, that was number 1 on the list. Pretty cool. Everybody hit the like button. If you haven't already, hit that like button. We still have so much to get through from today's cross-examination and the toxicologist. 12:29. So then we start to get into some of her phone calls to John O'Keefe. 12:29, she calls John O'Keefe. Record says he answered. She denies talking to him. Then they go through a bunch of other calls all the way up to 12:50. 7 calls, I think it was. But she never walked outside to see if he was laying in the snow, if he was coming in, where he was, if they were fighting, if something happened. She just stopped looking out the window. Or did she see him at 12:45 that, she said before? Very interesting. Very interesting. Jessica said, is it true the feds have a report like from Quantico that verifies Jen's Google search was at definitely 220? I highly doubt it, but I don't know. I don't know the answer. Okay, and then we go through some butt dials. We get our first instance of butt dials. And by the way, I do think the way she explained it, some jurors, like my dad, butt dials all the time. Some jurors may say, yeah, I get it. There's some butt dials when you hear it once. But by the time all these witnesses are done, the amount of butt dials we hear is a lot harder to believe than just one butt dial. And he's like, you have to go through all these steps, whatever. I think she did fine as far as it could be a butt dial. Then they start arguing with the Google search. And Jackson, it wasn't perfect. I thought this was one of the less great impeachments, but he was basically like, you admit you did a Google search at 227, and you admit that you at some point Googled How's long to die in the cold. She's like, no, I Googled Hosmock Sports or whatever at 227, et cetera, et cetera. She keeps making sure to not say I Googled that at 227. But Jackson was trying to get her to admit, I was Googling stuff at 227, and at some point my fingers typed in How's long to die in the cold. Eventually, he probably got there, but she said, I didn't never do that until after when Karen Reed asked me to do it after we found John. Then he gets into the fact that Carrie Roberts said it in her grand jury testimony, and she couldn't have known it unless Jennifer McCabe told her. And Jennifer McCabe admits that she told Carrie Roberts about that Carrie Roberts didn't necessarily hear it, but she didn't deny telling Carrie Roberts about that Google search. Then there was some discussion about the timeline here. Okay, so this is the end of Cross. And I didn't realize it was the end. Oh, wait, sorry, I'm not there yet. Just kidding. Timeline, then one other clip from Cross. We have two more clips from the Cross here.
I wouldn't say a version of events. We each put down what we remembered.
She saw what you put down. You saw what she put down.
Yes.
And you compared and contrasted those with each other to create that timeline, correct?
No, we didn't compare and contrast. I said, she called me, she said this, then Carrie, and someone was writing it down for us.
That would be your sister. Who?
It was my sister, yes.
Which sister?
My sister, Denise.
Oh yeah, I thought this was skillful lawyering. I've done this myself. When you see somebody, when you know somebody's in the courtroom, they're going to talk about them, and they're like, they're sitting right back there, aren't they?
What's your last name?
Galvin.
She here?
She is here, yes.
Where is she?
She's sitting over there.
Can you point to her and describe what she's wearing?
Yikes.
Sure, she's over there
Here, look at Brennan. Like, do I really have to do that?
in the back with a striped shirt on.
Between the gentleman in the purple and the gentleman in the black?
Yes.
And again, Jackson's trying to show just how invested they all are in this case. She takes the plea. It's the end. If not, here we are.
She witnessed this timeline being prepared, correct?
She wrote the timeline, yes.
And then you've spoken to Ms. Roberts several times about this case
Yes.
and about your perceptions of this case, correct?
We talk about what happened and the aftermath of this case. We don't talk about the specific details as much as we talk about the aftermath of everything.
And I will give Jennifer McCabe credit. She did not force her way into the witness harassment. I don't know if she was instructed to or whatever. Last trial, she would have forced her way into that. This trial, she did not, which I think is one of the reasons why she definitely presented better this trial.
Hey, the fact is you instructed Carrie Roberts to say that she heard that Google hypothermia statement from my client before she testified at the grand jury, didn't you?
No, absolutely not. I never instructed her to do anything.
You wanted some witness to back up your story about this Google search, correct?
No, absolutely not. I don't
Ms.
need.
McCabe,
It was said. Karen said it. It's that simple.
so you're the only person saying that, though.
Yes, and I stand by that 110%.
And the reason that you wanted another witness to back up that statement is because you knew that that Google search for "How long to die in cold" points a very uncomfortable finger right toward you, correct?
I never did that search at 227. I never needed to instruct somebody. No, I'm sorry.
She is saying she's the only one. Tanya, Jen was amazing. KR is going to jail, in my opinion. So here's my question for you, Tanya. Do you think this was enough? You think Jennifer McCabe's testimony was good enough to prove that Karen Reed hit John O'Keefe with her car beyond a reasonable doubt? Or are you saying what you expect to hear is going to get you there? Giovanna, it would be interesting to see if prosecution comes after all of them once the trial's ended in a not guilty verdict. Would that be possible? Possible, highly unlikely. I highly doubt that's going to happen.
There's that apology again. Has someone told you that you need to apologize?
Here we
when
go.
when there's an uncomfortable question that you don't want to answer?
No.
Have you discussed this with anybody?
No, and that's not an uncomfortable question. I'm fine to answer it.
How many times did you say "I apologize" yesterday in cross-examination?
I didn't count.
Probably more than 15, right?
I have no idea. I'm just trying to answer the questions and be truthful as I can.
And you're aware that the Celebrite extraction that was done on your phone determined that of the three searches, 2:27 a.m., 6:23 a.m., 6:24 a.m., only one of them was recorded as deleted, correct?
Gotcha. Sustained.
Have you ever been confronted?
I mean, that's pretty. And he asked the question, recorded as deleted, because that's in evidence. That's a fact. Now they say she didn't delete it. There's all these other reasons why it could have deleted. Michelle said, if you butt dial inadvertently, why delete it? Good point. Why delete just one? That is a big question. Now, if you ask Ian Whiffen, it just happened, and we don't know why. And it's a doubt. It's a reasonable doubt as to how that happened.
With having deleted a Google search off your phone? You ever been asked that?
Yes, by you.
Do you deny that you deleted a Google search off your phone?
I never deleted a Google search off my phone.
So you
I never
deny
did that. I deny it. Yes.
that you ever deleted a Google search?
Yes. I never made the search.
I'd like to move back to the time of about.
All right. So we're going to jump to the last clip here. Jebby said the private text that said to tell the reporter guy, the guy never came in the house sounded bad, not John, the guy. I agree. That's the worst text for them. If you're just asking me, that's the worst text for them. Peter, do you have an opinion on how they can bring in the fact that the Commonwealth changed their theory 4 times? I don't get how that's allowed. So one of the ways I think they can get into that is with some of the law enforcement officers. I think they're going to get into that with the toxicologist. So stick around till the end of the video, because we'll get into some issues that happen with the toxicologist that may let the jury know this hasn't always been the same exact theory or timeline that they have today. Peter, what's your opinion on Jen saying, sorry, I want to hold this one. Lisa Liu, do you think it was risky to overtly accuse Jen at the end of cross as opposed to leaving an option for the juror to think cover up? Was the inference enough? That's a strategy question. I don't know. I would err on the side of saying it. So just in case you have some jurors that just aren't thinking that or whatever, you plant the seed and say, think about that, jurors. Think about what you see as this trial goes on. Looking at the jury with those lying eyes, do you think it's going to affect the jury the way it did with Amber Heard? She's the first person I've noticed it be a little strange with, but I don't know. It's impossible for me to know how individual jurors think that. Dorothy D. Peter, a juror did complain to a court officer yesterday at 10:30 a.m. that they did not like how he sat near Karen and his laughter during Jackson questioning. That's why. So a juror complained? I don't know. Peter, do you think Free Karen Read is a cult? By definition, I would say no, but I'm not an expert on it. So I don't know. I don't really know what makes them a group necessarily, except if they believe that she's innocent. Usually that's not a cult. If they believe she's not guilty, I would say that's usually also not a cult. But we can get into those definitions another time. Worst thing JM said that ruined her credibility. To me, as the lawyer, it would have been like none of that stuff refreshes your recollection. Very clearly dancing around, not answering certain things. The walking up to the door, looking, 1:45, seeing the door, texting John, all of that. I think that was part of the worst. You ask these questions sometimes, Ashley, that's like 3 days of testimony. I have to rack my brain and remember. There's probably a better answer to that, but that's what pops into my head the most is the struggle that she has with the timeline. The did I hit him or I hit him or I could have hit him is not as big of a deal to me as the timeline and her refusing to say, oh, and the FBI or the agents. That one was horrible too. Lying to them about who she called and still acting like she doesn't really remember today. Karen admitted on national television that she said, I hit him. And today, the clip where Karen expected to find him in that spot because she hit him. We're going to get to that clip. Is it normal for defendants to sit in on sidebars? Yes. Depending on the jurisdiction, yes. Chris J. Peter, huge fan. Please balance the sound. Turn you down or turn up the courtroom. Keep up the great work. I do the best I can with balancing it. So I'm sorry that it's not perfect. Justin, typical for witnesses to legit stare down the jury. I don't know that she's staring them down versus like trying to act like she's talking to them and turning towards them. I don't know. Mary C., what can the public or community do about Aunt Bev? I see she is not elected, but I strongly feel that there should be consequences to her obvious bias. Go see how she's appointed and you elect somebody that has to do with her appointment, right? And you can complain to somebody that has to do with that. I'm not telling you to. If you want to, there are people you can complain to that can control who takes these seats. And it's not just her, right? You need to look and be involved in your local judicial, either elections or local elections that affect who become judges in your areas because it's very important. Vicky, yes, they do. I love it. I use it all the time, 3 times speed. Love it. And I actually used it today. All right. Now we will get to, he shows her a bunch of clips. He sets the stage kind of what was happening that night, how medically critical things were, and they were trying to save John's life. And then he gets into the end of cross that I thought was so strong. Judge Cannoni tried to stop, and he's like, hey, I just need a couple more questions, and he did not waste them. So let's take a listen here.
I didn't know. I don't think I answered that question. I don't think it was asked.
You didn't know if Carrie Roberts knew CPR, correct?
I didn't know if they knew CPR, correct?
And none of you were paramedics?
No.
None of you are first responders?
No.
None of you are trained in emergency life-saving techniques in any way, correct?
Correct.
I have a question, Ms. McCabe. On all of Fairview, the entire road between Chapman and Cedar Crest, can you think of any person on that road who might have had life-saving techniques trained into them? First responder, someone who knew how to deal with someone in distress, someone with high skill level training. Do you think of anyone on Fairview who had that kind of training?
Can I now or did I then? Which are you asking?
Did you then?
No, then my focus was on John O'Keefe.
Okay, let me narrow the focus. How about on the property? How about 34 Fairview? Could you think of anyone that was a first responder who would have life-saving training, life-saving technique training under his belt?
Yes, my brother-in-law, Brian Albert.
Huh. So all the people out there, she knew or thought or realized, obviously, when they start doing their jobs or trying to do CPR, none of them were trained. None of them really know what they're doing at that point, maybe prior training, but she knew somebody just a few steps away, highly trained and capable to help them save her very close friend, John O'Keefe, in a very critical time, and she did not go inside and get him. Why? She didn't want to wake him up. She didn't want to bother him. Why? It doesn't. You cannot give me a good reason why.
And you didn't go in the house, did you?
No, I did not.
When you arrived at the scene, you didn't go in? Not until much later, correct?
Our focus was John.
You knew that Brian Albert was inside the house.
Wait.
You've just been with him hours earlier.
Brian Albert could help you with your focus, which is John. Jen, I had never seen this when I first started my channel. Everybody pushed it so much and I watched it. Loved it too. Would recommend. 10 out of 10.
Earlier, correct?
Yes.
You knew that his window was
Sorry, I realized I said Jen. I was talking to Jen, the comment that's on the screen right now. I wasn't talking to Jen McCabe.
30 feet away. You're staring at it. You look at it if you wanted to, correct?
It's off to an angle.
And you didn't go in the house then either.
I did not know.
You knew that John O'Keefe was clinging to life during those precious minutes and seconds. Is that right?
I did, yes.
And you also knew that Brian Albert, your brother-in-law, was a first responder trained to deal with people in that kind of distress, correct?
In that moment, my only thoughts were John and everything we could do for John.
And you knew that there were warm blankets inside the house. Is that right?
I did, yes. There were warm blankets in the house.
And you
Those
still
weren't-
never went in, did you?
No, I went and attended to John because once I finished calling 911, I went over to John and Kerry Roberts asked me to take over compressions. So I felt like that was more important. And 911 was on the way. I never thought about going in the house. I just thought, how can I help John?
You never thought about going.
That's wild. She never thought about going. I guess it's possible, right? It's possible she never thought about going in the house. That's just hard for me to imagine. God's masterpiece. Can you put a poll up to find out who's watching the trial for the first time and believes JM's testimony? So a very small percentage, I think it was only like 20% of people were watching it for the first time. So I think it'd be hard for only some people to answer that just watched trial for the first time. But you can let me know in the chat if you're watching for the first time, how believable do you find Jen McCabe's testimony? Touche. Have jurors ever told you they saw a judge's bias? Never. I have never gotten that review from a juror ever that I've interviewed or talked to in my cases or other cases. It's a great question because I didn't think about it until you just asked it. Judge C gives the defense big rulings that could be appellate issues, but then is inappropriate in front of the jury when it's less likely to be underturned. Grimy tactic. My guess is the jury's not picking up on it, or if they are, it's subconscious.
Going in the house. But you did pull out your cell phone and make 2 phone calls, didn't you?
After I called 911, I tried calling my sister, yes.
While John was out in the cold, clinging to life, you weren't doing chest compressions at 6:07 and 6:08, were you?
I was walking over when I was calling.
You were calling your sister on the phone, weren't you?
I was calling them to see if they would come out, but I was going right over to work on him.
And you could have walked 25 feet to the front door, walked in the house, and screamed for Brian Albert to come out and help you in those precious seconds and minutes, couldn't you?
That would have taken me away from helping John, getting Harry blankets, giving him compressions.
And making those 2 very important phone calls at 6:07 and 6:08 that you say were not answered. Correct?
They were not important phone calls. I tried to call my sister, and then I focused on John.
They were not important phone calls, but they were important enough for you to make while John is clinging to life right there in front of you, right?
As I was walking over, I called to see if she would answer.
And she didn't answer. Let's talk about that. She didn't
No.
answer according to you.
So if we're going to talk about it, we're beyond the luncheon break.
Your Honor, I have 2 more questions.
Okay.
And I'll wrap it.
Okay.
Let's talk about that real quick.
Sure.
She didn't answer the phone, did she?
No, she didn't.
So you have a situation where a man is laying dead or dying in the front yard of your sister's house. You see nothing in terms of life inside the house. Lights aren't coming on. They're not getting up. They're certainly not coming outside, right?
They were sound asleep
They weren't coming outside, were they?
because they were asleep.
You didn't know if they were asleep. All you knew was there was a severely injured man on the front lawn of their house, and your sister didn't answer the phone, not once, but twice, correct?
Correct. She didn't answer the phone.
Did you think your sister might have been in peril? Did you think to go inside the house and check that they're okay?
I had no reason to think that they weren't okay.
You had no reason to believe they weren't okay. A man was dead or dying on their lawn, and your sister's not answering the phone, and nobody is coming out to the chaos of Karen Reed screaming on the front lawn. You didn't think there was some reason to believe they could have been in peril?
I didn't because your client was screaming she hit him. She had a cracked taillight. She was crying she hit him. I didn't.
All right, so I want to play this again. So Jackson's starting to get fired up. He's starting to get louder. It's the end of his cross. This is crescendo. This is his big thing to end on. Jen McCabe feels that. Jen McCabe responds in kind, as Judge Cannoni would say, and she starts to get a little heated. I think the point is well taken. That is something that is incredibly unbelievable to me that you wouldn't go inside. Does it prove she did something wrong? No. Does it prove there's a conspiracy? No. Is it very sus, as the kids say? Yes, I think it is. I think it's incredibly suspect that they would not walk inside the house that they were in last night. That is her sister's house, where the door is unlocked, where you've called them multiple times that morning already. That makes no sense. That makes no sense to me. And so he's trying to end with this. So the jury looks at her like, this is very weird. And so what does she do? She tries to boil down why Karen Reed is guilty in 2 sentences, which can do one of 2 things. Number one, jurors can be like, oh, that makes sense. A lot of evidence against Karen Reed. It's probably Karen Reed. Why are we pointing the finger at her? It's very clear all this evidence points to Karen Reed. Or number 2, oh, I thought she was just this unbiased soccer mom witness who was trying to help out her friend. I didn't think she had such an agenda to try to force this towards Karen Reed. 2 ways to look at it. Opposite sides of the spectrum. That's why you never know what's going to happen in a jury trial. And a lot of people were wrong in the last one because 8 people voted guilty on some lesser included charge. I do not see so far, at least, how they've proven anything beyond a reasonable doubt. They have a lot of weeks left, so we'll see. But are you allowed to use the term reasonable doubt in questioning? Yes, and Jackson did. Now, if they don't know the legal definition, there can be objections and things like that. But yeah, you're allowed to ask it. Al dente, was it ex parte when Brendan shook his head to Bev in open court? No.
And nobody is coming out to the chaos of Karen Reed screaming on the front lawn. You didn't think there was some reason to believe they could have been in peril?
I didn't because your client was screaming she hit him. She had a cracked taillight. She was crying she hit him. I didn't. But my focus, can I finish, please?
You had solved the crime right then and there. You solved the whole case.
And that's why you got to be careful. When you try to land a punch, just like boxing, when you try to land a punch on a good lawyer, he's there. He's ready. He's willing to argue back and forth, quick-witted, ready to go. He is immediately ready with the response, which I thought was a chef's kiss response. So you solved the case, Miss McCabe. You knew it was Karen Reed that moment when you showed up. Except that goes against everything you've been saying. Oh, I told her to stop. She was just talking crazy. I was trying to help her out. Even Brendan was trying to ask questions. Jen, you were trying to help Karen Reed out, right? I forgot to say that the I hit him part. If you were sitting there knowing, and the reason you didn't go inside the house is because you knew Karen Reed did it, because she admitted it, she had a broken taillight with pieces everywhere, and she was screaming hysterically and knew right where John was when we pulled up. If that was really true, all of your actions would have been different from that moment on. That's the truth. Now, will the jury pick up on that? Jackson didn't get to make that argument at this point in front of the jury. But to me, that was a major slip up for Jen McCabe to act like that's the reason she didn't go inside, because I solved the case right there. I knew it had nothing to do with the Alberts inside 34 Fairview. I knew right then and there it was Jen McCabe. And we know Michael Proctor did too. Within 24 hours, solved the case.
No, I didn't. I knew John never came in the house, so I had no concern for anyone's safety inside the house.
The reason you didn't go inside the house is because you knew better. You knew better. You knew she wasn't in peril. You knew that Brian Albert wasn't in peril. You weren't worried at all about them, were you?
I was not worried at all because something happened on the front lawn that had nothing to do with anything inside that house.
You weren't worried about them at all because you knew what really happened, didn't you?
At that moment, I didn't know that he was hit by a vehicle and there was taillight found next to him.
All right, jurors, luncheon break.
And so she tries to say again, he was hit by a vehicle and taillight pieces were found next to him, which is still evidence that is going to be developed with law enforcement. Honestly, to me, that was a really good ending to cross-examination for Jackson. He was able to, like the question pointed out, start getting the jury to think what happened inside. I also like the other kind of theory that if you have a cop that's passed away on the lawn and another cop inside and the door is unlocked and they're not coming out and they're not answering phone calls, how would you not be worried about your sister and brother-in-law? I mean, forget about coming out to help John. That's an interesting thing as well. An interesting part of it. All right, they break for lunch. Let's hit some questions here. Susie, when Hank Brennan asks JM questions again after AJ, you can see JM grab the box of tissues in anticipation of tears coming. She is deliberate in everything she does. Thoughts? She has to sell her story. I didn't pick up on that as much. Maybe if you guys did in the chat, let me know. Because I like to hear from the chat. Some of you did, some of you didn't. That's usually representative of the jury. Some of the jury maybe picked up on it. Some of them didn't. Hi, can AJ say in closing something like, we impeached JM a total of X times? Can try. Some judges will let you, some won't. Wish you practiced in Massachusetts. I need you to sue a tire company for me. That sounds like a wild story all on its own. But yes, you can talk about how many times she said, I don't remember, and how many times she had inconsistent statements, and how many times she didn't say this to a grand jury, et cetera, et cetera. Nikki, Paul got in trouble Wednesday, now in back corner of row 2, rest of the trial. Rumor says a juror complained. If true, can they still keep that juror or biased? I don't know what the complaint was. That's going to be a discussion for the lawyers. I would have to know so much more information before I could give you really a correct and good answer to that. Why didn't AJ say anything about JM? There were taillight pieces next to his body when none were found when he was found. So that could be part of the timing issue. Judge Canoni wanted to go to lunch. They were already late. She was going to slip in those comments. I think Jennifer McCabe broke character a little bit there at the end. So will the jurors be like, what was that versus how you've been this whole time? I don't know. Cristobal, is it proper for a judge to tell the lawyer to move on? If it's a immaterial issue and they're wasting time and it's no big deal, it's appropriate. If it's a material issue and she does it, the lawyer should have the right, especially a criminal defense lawyer, to dig into that issue as much as he thinks is necessary. So it's inappropriate in certain scenarios. Justin, why not Google history data versus cell Safari data? I don't know what you mean by this. When Jennifer McCabe said I want to save that. Last show, Kaylee, shout to Fleming's sisters, not the actual twins that grew up in Canton. FYI, judge is wild. Is it normal judge behavior? Thank you, Esquire. Some of it is, some of it is not. And I've tried to point out as much as I could what's appropriate, inappropriate, different, similar to how judges act. Lots of questions coming up here. What's the difference between innocent and not guilty? Great question, Joey. And I love to explain this as much as I can. Innocent means factually it's proven you did not do this. Not guilty means either you're innocent, factually proven you did not do this, or the state could not prove you were guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So not guilty encompasses innocent and not proven, meaning the state could not prove you were guilty. So if you're innocent, you're also not guilty, right? But just because you're not guilty doesn't always mean you're innocent. Hopefully you understood that. Okay, now we're going to get to redirect. They started out talking about the weather a little bit, but then he gets into something that I think was a mistake for him to bring up. And we'll talk about why here in a second.
Law enforcement?
Yes. All I wanted to do was to get help for John, and as fast as I could.
You saw her on the dash cam. You spoke to a number of different people in law enforcement.
Yes.
In fact, during that day, a number of different people from law enforcement, did they call you?
I'll allow that. Move along to you, Mr. Ryan.
Did a number of people call you from law enforcement that day?
On the day of the 29th,
Yes.
Michael Proctor called me.
Did you speak to law enforcement after that day?
Yes.
Were you asked to engage in interviews?
Yes.
Were you asked to testify in front of grand juries?
Yes.
Were you asked to come to court and testify?
Yes.
Did you ever once refuse to speak to the police?
No.
Did you ever once
Yes, she did. Right? I mean, cutting off an interview. Why ask that question? First off, you can't ask that question to a criminal defendant, right? You can't be using somebody's right to remain silent against them. But she's a witness, and the lawyer friendly to her is asking her that question. Did you ever refuse to speak to law enforcement? And if I want to be technical and I want to, nitpick and be a jerk, I could say twice. When they want to talk, she lied and said she was somebody else, maybe 3 times. She said she needed 10 minutes, so that's saying, no, I'm not going to talk to you right now. And number 3, she cut the interview off. Why even ask that question? Because he's trying to prove just how cooperative she is and how she's not a bad guy. I think you can prove that without asking that question. You were very cooperative throughout everything. You even turned your cell phone over, which he gets to. That to me was a very big unforced error by Hank Brennan that was unnecessary. And when we get to redirect, or recross, I should say, this is redirect, we'll talk more about that.
refuse to testify?
No.
When you were speaking to the police on that dash cam, pick on the dash cam, why were you speaking to the police?
Well, each officer that arrived had a set of questions of who it was, what happened, etc. So I was answering all the questions because my main focus was John.
Did you ever try to be evasive with the police?
No, I told them everything I knew.
Did you ever try to avoid?
I mean, why is he asking these questions after she just got impeached 100 times and said all these cops' reports are wrong? How many cops did she say what they put in their report is wrong? Were you evasive with the police? Either you were evasive in changing your story, including to the agents, lying about who you called, which you kind of admitted, or they got your story completely wrong. I don't know why he's asking these questions and rehashing this.
Speaking to them. Did you ever hold anything back from the police when you spoke to them?
I'll allow that, and then let's move on, Mr. Perry.
No, I didn't.
When you interviewed with many different law enforcement and people involved in this case, were you ever given an opportunity to review somebody else's report after it was written and provide edits or your input?
I'll allow it.
No.
Why are you asking that? Like, if I am Alan Jackson, I'm writing every single one of these questions down. I may even pull this to show the judge later, because when law enforcement officers get up there where she has an inconsistent statement, I'm going to bring this up. Be like, Judge, they made this an issue at trial, that she wasn't able to check and edit the reports. Therefore, if they're wrong, the cops are wrong. Trooper Proctor, do you make accurate reports? Do you let the witness review your report afterwards? Why not? Why is it so important for you to be accurate? Did you write down what Jen McCabe said in your report? Were you accurate? So if she left something out or she lied or whatever, you wouldn't know, right? You just wrote down what she said. Is it common practice to let her review your report before you submit it, or any witness you talk to? Why? Why not? Oof. Yes, she did call her Miss Reed again. My guess is Jen McCabe does not love that. Okay. They talk about the first responders show up, no sirens on, none of the neighbors came out. I thought that was a good point, that if it was so loud and it was so chaotic, why didn't all the other neighbors come out? Because all of us were saying, yeah, I would go out. My neighbors would all be outside. Good point. He asks about her heartbeat being, faster, calling 911 because he's going to try to use it raised there, but it didn't raise when she was making the 227 Google search. Then he talks about she and Carrie. Okay, then he goes into the text messages, which I actually thought some of these were helpful and were good, and it was a good idea to do. I just don't know why they were allowed in. They really seemed like self-serving hearsay, that Jennifer McCabe was able to read all these text messages about what we're going through and the trauma, and I almost threw up, and I'm so sad, and are you okay, and what they're talking about. And I guess they're coming in because of state of mind, like her state of mind at the present, which is usually, I'm so scared, or I'm freaking out right now, or whatever. Like, a lot of these did not sound like that. But I did think that it was a good redirect by Brennan when it came to that stuff, normalizing it, trying to make it seem like just any old friends or family group text chain after something traumatic happens. To me, that's what it felt like. But I don't know. And then he wants to include all of her text messages as evidence. That's scary. You gotta be careful doing something like that. Stephanie, if Jennifer McCabe knew it was Karen Reed, why didn't you tell the cops to arrest her when they showed up? Exactly. Among other things. Lita, didn't Jen tell 911 that John may be dead and she still thought she was saving his life instead of getting her first responder brother-in-law out to help? Sus as H. What happened if there's another hung jury? Will the defense poll the jury? How likely do you think it is a worried MA resident? I think it's possible. I would say, let's wait till the evidence is done. But just on what I think is going to happen, I think a hung jury might be more likely than a guilty verdict. But I don't know. We'll see. If it happens, then the prosecutors get to make a decision. Are they going to try her again? My guess is yes. What is the point to keep? I'll save that when we get to the BAC. Peter, does it bother you how much Bev lets the Commonwealth do versus the defense? Yes, it bothers me with every judge. Almost every judge gives the prosecutor, they feel like they're with the prosecutor. Almost every judge I've tried a criminal case with, or on the prosecution side or the defense side. Has the defense tried to subpoena Google server logs for searches conducted at 227 on 129? How long until Jen goes to prison? I don't know the answer to this. I was on a jury for a $74 million civil case. We listen. We love to hear it. Love to hear it. All right. Let's get to now the recross, where I thought Brennan opened some doors. Let's see if Jackson walks through them.
34 Fairview, on the way to Sergeant Lang's house on redirect examination on Brennan just now, correct?
I was, yes.
He showed you a couple of pages of your transcript from that question and answer, correct?
I believe he showed me a page, yes.
And you noted that this was a question and answer from a hearing last year in this courtroom.
Yes.
And you admitted that you stopped, actually, let me rephrase that. You were confronted with the fact that you stopped at 34 Fairview on the way to Officer Lang's house, Sergeant Lang's house, by me on cross-examination, correct?
Yes, you asked me.
That's the reason we ever found out about Link.
You also indicated that you have never refused to speak to the police, any law enforcement officer in this case, correct?
I've spoken when but asked to, yes.
And here we go. That door was opened by Hank Brennan. He's like, you said you never refused to speak with law enforcement. Let's talk about that.
But in point of fact, when you were approached by the two law enforcement agents who were not connected to Massachusetts State Police or to Canton PD, you suspended that interview and refused to answer further questions, correct?
I welcomed them in my house, sat with them, and then I stopped. And then I met with them a few times after, and I answered all their questions that they asked. I helped clear up some misconceptions that they had been told. And as you know, I know they're no longer investigating. So I think.
So like, and I want to play it again so that we can hear Dr. Amy. I think Brendan purposely asked those lead Jackson to asking so she could say that rehearsed line about the federal investigation is over. Well, that's a problem if that's true. I don't think it's true. I hope it's not true that Brendan would do that. And I'm going to play this again, and then I'm going to answer some of your questions about this specifically because this was a surprise to me and opened doors that I did not expect to be open in this case as a question, and we're about to get into it. By the way, we're over an hour. We're in some overtime. We're not going to go crazy overtime, but if you could hit that like button, I would very much appreciate it. The last one got over 20,000 likes, which is just insane that videos get that many likes. So if you guys could all hit the like button, maybe we can get there again on this video, and I appreciate it so much. Let's listen to this again.
To Massachusetts State Police or to Canton PD, you suspended that interview and refused to answer.
So by the way, he does a good job. You might not be able to hear it. Talking about the difference, right? This isn't MSP or Canton PD, but those other agents are the ones you didn't talk to and you cut off interviews with.
Further questions, correct?
I welcomed them in my house, sat with them, and then I stopped. And then I met with them a few times after, and I answered all their questions that they asked. I helped clear up some misconceptions that they had been told. And as you know, I know they're no longer investigating. So I think
So first off, I'm going to answer these questions. Izzy, Peter, what is your opinion on Jen saying, as you know, they're no longer investigating? Shouldn't it open the door to the whole FBI involvement? Fire Medic said, when Jennifer McCabe said she knows the investigation is closed, does that open the door to the defense bringing it up? Lori said, Pete, do you think Jen opened the door to the FBI being mentioned going forward with other witnesses, AKA ARCA? Okay. So let me answer a few of these questions here. Number one, does it open the door? To open the door to something, it has to come into evidence and either confuse the jury or be necessary to explain what happened. To me, Jennifer McCabe blew that door wide open because not only did they talk about it, not only did they mention it, she said, this is in evidence, right? This isn't a question, as the judge has reminded the jury so much. Questions are not evidence. Her answer is evidence. Her testimony is evidence, and she has said, I cleared up misconceptions, and as you know, they're no longer investigating, or the investigation's over, whatever she said. To me, I'm Jackson. I say, Judge, that has a lot to do with who hired ARCA. We want to get into it. Now, you got to be careful because the defense, if you get into it, is it going to look bad for you? They're no longer investigating. You don't know a lot of things. You can't get fully into it. The feds are going to block some of the things you want to get into. So if you're going to get into it, how far are we going to go? This is a surprise. I did not think anything like this was going to happen to potentially open this door. I still think the answer is no. I still don't think the judge is going to allow it. And I think the main reason the judge is not going, I think the fact that it's prejudicial to the Commonwealth potentially should not be the reason she doesn't allow it. I think because the Commonwealth witness forced that answer after the door being open to it from the prosecutor on redirect. To me, now obviously the cross question is what elicited it, but he had to impeach the fact that she said she was cooperative with all law enforcement, never cut off interviews. That just is not true. He had to ask that question. But I think the reason you can't get into it is it's too confusing. We don't know enough. We're not going to get enough information. And so sneaking this little jab in there, will it be something positive for the Commonwealth? We'll see. The other weird thing is, if the jury picked up on it, they can't rewind it. If any of them are writing it down to quote it, they're not going to go back and read it again later. If you think about what she said, I was able to clear it up for them, some misconceptions, and they're no longer investigating. Well, if the jury's putting 2 and 2 together and they see Karen Reed's still sitting over there as a criminal defendant, Karen Reed's still getting charged, the cops still think Karen Reed did this, so they must not have been investigating Karen Reed. So who were they investigating? Was there an agency of different law enforcement officers investigating Jen McCabe and the group chat crew? Is that what was happening here? Are they going to put 2 and 2 together? Is her sneaking that line in? You kind of, feels like karma sometimes. You try to sneak that in to make it bad for Karen Reed. Will any juror, right? Highly doubtful all of the jurors are going to look there and be like, oh, I just figured out what she's talking about. Will any juror pick up on that and realize that that doesn't have anything to do with investigating Karen Reed? I don't know. Thought it was pretty interesting, though. Can silence be used against you or must use state 5A? No, your silence cannot be used against you as a criminal defendant. Do you personally believe she was coached as how to testify? She is so different from last time. And if you do believe she was coached by whom? Yes, I think they discussed her demeanor and prepared her to present differently this time. Lots of lawyers do that. I don't have a problem with a different demeanor. I have a problem with changing testimony, right? If you're either lying or omitting things or changing your testimony to fit a narrative that's not true, I have a problem with that. I'm not going to say anybody coached her to do that. I don't know. But the demeanor thing, yes, people absolutely talk about how you can present differently. Bethany, so many of us would love to see a collab with you and Brother Counsel. He said he is willing and emailed you. Can we make this happen? I don't know who that is, so I have to look into it. But let me see if I can look into it. I got to be honest. This is the most busy time I feel like I'm going to have all year. So if there are like court days that they don't have court, we'll see if we can work something like that out. What is the point to keep going over? Oh, sorry, I want to save that one. Lawyer, why weren't the witnesses made to sign the law enforcement reports upon completion? That's the sealing of their statement. Lots of law enforcement agencies just don't do that. So let's wait and see if they talk about that more. Have you ever seen a police report with a mistake on it? If so, what percent of them have them versus not? 75% of police reports have mistakes, maybe higher. Completely wrong witness statements, less than 50%, probably even a smaller percentage than that. Did you notice when she lost it a minute ago, she said Karen was yelling, she cracked the taillight, then she argued it was broken with missing pieces. I definitely noticed that there are some inconsistencies in most of what she says. Let's listen here to the end of this recross here. There's a couple minutes left I want to hear.
I helped them well.
And you're obviously well aware that in that first interview, you stopped the interview cold and refused to answer further questions, correct?
I said, I'm going to stop and I'm going to seek some counsel. Yes.
After you just said on redirect that you never did that.
Messages. You just read a series of text messages that Mr. Brennan actually read for you and you agreed with, correct?
Correct.
Were any of the text messages that you just read in the group chat that I showed you in cross-examination?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
And that group chat included you, Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Matt McCabe, correct?
Correct.
And that was a private chat among the four of you. Is that right?
That's just a chat with them. Yes.
You read some text messages to and from Kerry Roberts, correct?
Yes.
You had just met Carrie Roberts. Isn't that right?
Yes.
She's not a McCabe. Is that right?
Correct.
She's not an Albert. Correct?
Correct.
You even read some text messages with your minor children. Correct?
Just now?
Yeah.
I don't believe any with my children.
Mr. Brennan asked you about a couple of text messages, or at least one text message with your children.
No, we didn't.
Objection.
She can answer that question. Is that what happened?
Did I misunderstand?
No, I honestly didn't read anything from my children. I think one, I said a friend, another time I didn't know who it was, but I do know my children's phone numbers, and no, it was
Okay.
none of my kids.
And I thought it was, she was saying like, honestly, like for that, I am being honest. That's what it felt like. It's like, for that one, I swear I am being, I know we've battled a lot, Jackson. For that one, I swear I'm being honest. Okay. Now we are going to slow it down to 1 time speed and listen to the videos that Brennan is going to play of Karen Reed herself. Because this is one of the biggest pieces of evidence of them. So I want us to see what the jury is seeing and how, because somebody's been asking questions about pleading the fifth, your silence, not testifying. Well, this is the jury seeing what Karen Reed has to say.
Two things. Either he's hurt himself and is incapacitated. He could be passed out on someone's couch, which is just weird. We're not on a campus. Everyone lives in their own home with children, or he's sleeping with someone. And there were multiple women in the neighborhood of Fairview that John had been with. And one of them very recently, before I started dating John.
Clip 16, please.
We'll backtrack later. Let's start with baseball therapy. So, who are you with? I'm with Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts, and Carrie Roberts is Ford Explorer. And I'm in the back, leaning over the front 2 seats. Carrie's driving and Jen's in the passenger seat. And I describe this to everyone, so you've probably heard this before, but John looked like a buffalo on the prairie. It was just a lawn and a heat that it wasn't a bush or a hydrant or a dog. It was a weird shaped lump at that time in those elements. And I was looking to find him on the side of the road. I was expecting I'd find him. And the fear of what I was going to see is the worst feeling I've ever experienced. The anticipation of what is awaiting me was as extreme a feeling. I wouldn't say it was as extreme a feeling as the grief of realizing what happened to him.
Okay, so you can tell me what you think. Were those good, bad, indifferent for Karen Reed? Clearly, they're still trying to push the narrative that John O'Keefe could have been sleeping with somebody. She was jealous. Jealousy is a big part of this. And then, of course, they want to discuss that she knew she was going to find him on the side of the road. And that's a problem. I think that's what the Commonwealth was trying to get out there. Could it go the other way? And the jury may think, oh, that investigation is closed. That's why Karen Reed is being charged. Here's what I'll say. Any which way you guys can think about it, any which way you can take that information and what you could infer from it, I think a juror could too. I really do. Stuart, starting law school on Capitol Hill this fall. Congratulations. Thank you for your inspiration, Peter. Any tips for someone starting their law journey later in life? So you have a major advantage, Stuart. You've had a real job probably before, I will assume. If you treat law school like a 8:30 to 5:30 job, you will be able to get all of your reading, studying, classwork, everything done in that time period where you can still live a normal life. And you shouldn't have to pull all-nighters. I didn't pull a single all-nighter in law school once. Treat it like a job, treat it seriously, and use every single hour in that time. Don't go skip around and do something else. If you're going to go to the gym, if you're going to play pickleball or golf, do it before, after, or on the weekends. That would be my advice. Do you think he should have ended with the lying to the FBI? It seemed like a big deal to me. I think one more question, like none of those chats were in the group chat I was asking you about. I think that was fine. He did ask maybe 1 or 2 questions too many. I think that's fair. Why can't the jury know that the FBI interviewed Jen McCabe? Because it could be prejudicial and confusing to the jury, especially because we don't know that the FBI was doing X, Y, or Z. So are they going to infer something that's not appropriate from that? Without an official statement from the feds, can the prosecution say it is no longer an open case? Well, they got to report that the investigation was closed. Doesn't mean it can't be reopened, but that is a statement they got. Netwoman, did you catch Alan Jackson say he could do this all day when Jen McCabe wouldn't answer? I did not catch that. I did not catch that at all. Peter, your mob name should be Peter 2 times, like Jimmy 2 times from Goodfellas. Just kidding. Keep up the good work. It's awesome. Maybe I'll call Hank if I ever need him. Okay, let's get into the forensic scientist, toxicologist, whatever. Background, education, experience, how great they are, all the certifications. They collected the blood on January 29, 22 at 9:08 a.m. She talks about, extrapolation, whatever, how they do it, how they present conversion factors that are favorable to defendants. Yeah, right. But let's talk about what her BAC was at 9:08 a.m. And then after they do the extrapolation, what do they think it was, and what time were they asked to determine this for, which is very interesting. 6:31.
We use sort of the extremes of what we see in that literature, like a high and a low, to make sure that our approximation falls, that the true value would fall somewhere in between that low and that high value.
And what did you calculate as a low and a high range for this defendant's blood alcohol concentration from that alcohol reading from the Good Samaritan Medical Center?
So the 93 milligrams per deciliter serum ethanol concentration would convert to between 0.078 and 0.092%.
So 0.78 or 0.078, 0.08 is the legal limit, between 0.078 and 0.092. Sounds pretty good from Karen Reed. You might even beat a DUI charge if that's what you blew. Not 9 hours later, right? And that's where they're going to go back and do this extrapolation, which there's so many issues and so many things you can pick apart with it. The defense kind of started to get into some of it, didn't really get that far. We're not going to talk too much about Cross. I think they're going to bring her up another day. And Judge Cannoni was like, Yannetti, can we do this another day? I think everybody will thank you for it. She said something nice to the defense, which I thought was nice. Nicholas, can the jury ask questions? I don't believe they're allowed to here. In Florida, they are allowed to, most places with most judges. But that's where it is at 9:08. Okay, I think I have 30 more seconds on this clip. I don't know why. And then we'll jump to the extrapolation.
Or grams percent.
And again, Ms. Knowles, that's at the time that the blood is drawn at approximately 9:08 a.m. on January 29th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, turning your attention to retrograde extrapolation, can you explain to the jury what a retrograde extrapolation is?
Sure. A retrograde extrapolation is another service that the laboratory offers, where it's a calculation that we can perform when we have a alcohol concentration that was measured at a particular time, and it would be helpful or relevant to know what that person's blood alcohol concentration was at some point prior to that sample having been collected. What we're doing with this calculation is taking what we know about how quickly the human body is capable of breaking down alcohol and applying that rate of elimination to the time interval between when the sample was collected and tested and when there might be a particular time of interest, a car accident or some interaction where that person's blood alcohol concentration might be relevant.
And how is that done?
Similar to the range of conversion factors that we were looking at with the serum conversion, we know that the rate of elimination in alcohol in humans varies from person to person. And so based on studies where they're looking at rates of elimination in large groups of people, we know that alcohol can break down at a rate of between 0.010 and 0.025% per hour. And so we take when we're looking at a serum conversion and then being combined with a retrograde, we take the smaller of the serum conversion range and we add that to the slowest elimination rate multiplied by a time interval. And then we also take the larger of the serum conversion values, and then we add that to the fastest elimination rate multiplied by the time interval. We use a smaller time interval for that sort of minimum calculation to account for the fact that we don't want to overshoot that estimate of blood alcohol concentration. If there was,
And this goes on for quite a while. We're not going to watch it all. I just wanted to give you a little taste of like what the jury has to hear and listen to. And that's why, like, there are people saying, you know, it's not good. It's not accredited. They didn't do it right. Hospital lab was not accredited. Specimen was never tested in a forensic lab. Do you think that is going to matter to a jury? That's my question. I don't know. Some jurors it does, depending on how technical and scientific they are. Some of it just truly doesn't. They don't care. They're like, toxicologist, 0.09. I get it. I know 0.08 is illegal. The end. Jalissa said, what is the point to keep going over the blood alcohol levels and her being intoxicated if she already admitted she was drinking that night? If you remember from some of the jurors that were interviewed after the first trial, drinking, driving, car, John O'Keefe there, ends up dead, broken taillight, she must have done it. And it's not just that it was over a 0.08. If it was a 0.07 to a 0.09, I don't think they'd argue about it as much. But when we find out what it is at the time of the incident, which is still coming, I think you'll understand better as to why they really wanted to get into this. Let's jump ahead a little.
the time of the incident, the range that's provided as part of these calculations, the size of the range depends on the facts of the case and the amount of time that's passed between the time of the incident and the time of the sample collection. The more time that's elapsed, there's a greater difference between the faster and the slower rates of elimination, the 0.01 per hour and the 0.025 per hour.
And what do those minimum and maximum blood alcohol concentration numbers signify?
They signify the smallest and the largest concentration that could be reasonably expected based on the blood alcohol concentration and the rates of elimination that are being applied in the calculation.
Now, were you able to perform a retrograde analysis from this defendant's alcohol blood testing from the Good Samaritan?
Yes, I was.
And similarly, did you perform that in conformity with how you performed prior retrograde extrapolation analyses in other cases?
Yes, I did.
And what time was utilized in your analysis as the time of vehicle operation or of incident?
12:45 a.m., January 29th, 2022.
And do you know where that time?
12:45 a.m. on January 29th, 2022. This is why a trial like this is not won or lost. One day, one witness, one point. And this is why you have to build. In a lawyer, you have to have patience. And you have to be able to have forethought, plan ahead, play chess, not checkers, and think 2 steps ahead. Where else have you heard 12:45 a.m.? Where else? What other person in this trial has said anything happened at 12:45 a.m.? Now, Lally asks her, and Lally deals with the crap, right? He deals with the bruises. He deals with the stinky rat or whatever my dad calls it. He deals with it. He's like, where'd you get 12:45?
Time came from?
a.m., January 29th, 2022.
And do you know where that time came from?
I believe it was the time specified in the request from the district attorney's office.
And why is time of operation or time of incident important?
The DA, in their request, they gave it to her. And then what does Lally follow? Now, this question I would not have asked. It's like, Lally, what are you doing? It's like, well, why is it so important to get that right? It's like, you know you have it wrong now. This isn't trial number 1. This isn't your trial. We have a time of 12:31 and change. So why would you point out how important it is to have it right at 12:45? Because at 12:45, Jen McCabe said she saw them out there and went and looked and texted them. And Alan Jackson made sure the jury heard that Wednesday and at the beginning today. And at 12:45, we know Karen Reed's back at John O'Keefe's house.
And why is time of operation or time of incident important?
Because the time interval that we use in the calculation depends on the starting and the ending point of that calculation. So the time of incident is important because that's what we're basing the math on.
And what was the resulting minimum and maximum numbers that you calculated for the defendant's blood alcohol concentration from her blood testing reading from the Good Samaritan Medical Center?
That based on the 93 milligrams per deciliter value that was obtained at Good Samaritan, that the blood alcohol concentration for that individual at 12:45 a.m. Could be between 0.14 and 0.28 grams per cent.
And that's why I think they keep talking about it and they really got into this. I think they did it right. I would have done the same thing if I was the prosecutor. I don't think they overdid it. Both of these witnesses were kind of simple that talked about it. And for a jury to hear between 0.14 and 0.28, you're out there driving. If you're at 0.28 and you're driving, you might be able to hit something and not know it, right? I think a jury would think that. Now, science and the math and the trajectory and the injuries and the taillight and his arm, that's a bigger question that the Commonwealth's going to have to answer and close up that hole of reasonable doubt. But to just think, how is it possible you could hit somebody and not know it? If you're driving around at a 0.28, maybe, I don't know. So I think it was smart. I think it was good to present that. I think they had to. And I don't think they overdid the opinion. Now, they got the time wrong. And that's a pretty big deal when you have these detailed issues. I was on Hot 96.9 over in Boston with the Get Up crew in the morning. And somebody said, man, there's so many details. And I was like, yeah, that's what makes it hard for this defense. To make sure the jury is getting all the little details that are just wrong. And how many do you need to make it reasonable doubt?
So you calculated the defendant's blood alcohol concentration to be between 0.14 and 0.28 at 12:45 a.m. on January 29th, 2022. Is that correct?
Yes.
May I approach just to retrieve your honor?
Yes.
All right. That's the end of what we're going to listen to from the testimony today. Judge Cannoni said next week, full week, every day. So a lot of testimony, a lot of evidence. It seems like we're moving at a pretty good pace, I think. Brennan's keeping the witnesses much tighter. Ashley asked, why is the ID doc not redacted, inviting the jury to watch? I mean, maybe to show its authenticity. I don't know. It seems like the lawyers agreed on that. Marie, Peter, what is your call right now as far as guilty or not guilty? Nowhere near guilty at this point, but we're very early on in the evidence. You should start out not guilty, presumption of innocence, and the Commonwealth should force you into the guilty pack beyond a reasonable doubt. Bubbles. Could Karen Reed say ARCA was hired by the same agency, not the FBI, but say it was the same group, and maybe say not insurance company, use feedback from trial one? I would love it if I was the defense to say those same agents that went to Jen McCabe's house, they're the ones that hired ARCA too, right? I would love to say that. I don't know. I don't think they're going to be able to. BAC post-physical activity versus non-activity. Anthony, that's a great question. And when we do DUI trials where that's a big deal and there are differences, we go through a ton. What did you eat? Where did you sleep? What did you do? How much did you sweat? How much did you drink before? Did you rinse your mouth out with mouthwash before, you blew? All sorts of different things that can come into a play when you go through that. I don't think the defense is going to nitpick over that again. Like some of the people said, she drank a lot. We know it, and just kind of get past it. I don't know. We'll see. Is it just me? I hate that Karen Reed did these interviews, but I think many or most add context or are not as harmful as Brennan hopes, considering all the reasonable doubt. I don't know. We'll see. Brian Allman, if she's at a 0.02, I'm more surprised that she could hold her eyes open. So just real quick, when I was a prosecutor, we had a case that pled. It was a 5-foot young lady, third DUI, 0.35. She couldn't have weighed 100 pounds, literally couldn't have weighed 100 pounds. 0.35. Now, I get that because she's so small, less alcohol could get her that. But how are you standing up, let alone driving when you're that high? When you're that high of a blood alcohol content. Team Wicked Smart. Don't know time of last drink equal inadmissible. There's so much they don't know. But again, I don't think that the defense is really arguing that she was not drinking and driving. So, yeah, I mean, there's been some crazy ones. Woo! We're done with another week, folks. We're done with another week. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you've hit that like button. My dad and I are going to break down what his thoughts were of week 2 on Monday. You guys are the best. I appreciate it. I'm going to run an ad here, and then we're going to get to our brand new outro. So if you would hit that like button, I would appreciate it so much. Thank you so much, everybody that watches, that asks questions, that's involved in the conversation. I love it. I love hanging out with you guys. Can't wait till next week to talk about it more. Peace. Whenever we get rolling into these late night recaps daily for the trial, it is so hard for me to come down after all the energy and adrenaline I get doing these lives. But Dream has completely changed that for me. So in years past, it would take forever for me to wind back down and be able to fall asleep. But now just 2 pills or 1 scoop mixed into some ice cold milk for me. You can do hot chocolate. I like to do chocolate milk. I am falling asleep and getting drowsy so much faster. And I'm staying asleep through the night, which is awesome. It helps with recovery. It helps with work the next morning. It helps with literally everything. It just makes the day better. And because they continue to partner with me and sponsor these shows, you guys can do the same for a discount. My code is LYK for up to 35% off. The website is shopbeam.com/Peter Tragos, but don't forget that code LYK and you can get up to 35% off to help you fall asleep faster and stay asleep to get a good night's sleep. So every day you wake up refreshed and you're not drowsy or tired every day when you wake up. So check Dream out and let me know if it worked for you. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast featuring new episodes every week. And if you have a case that you want to personally talk to us about in your life, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, truck accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.